Thank you, everybody, for joining this evening for our Lake Placid Major Events Economic Impact Study review. We have Greg Pepitone. I said it 4 times, so I know how to say it. Hold on. Greg Pepitone. Greg, is that right? Did I get it?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Amen. Greg is a senior economist at Tourism Economics. Tourism Economics is a research firm focused on economic impact, forecasting, marketing analysis, and I'm sure plenty of other things. It's a tourism-based destination, so it looks at tourism-based destinations around the world and helps gather information so that companies and associations, destinations can use this data to, make decisions in regards to marketing, investments, policy decisions, and many other uses for the data and the work that Greg and his company does. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. And without further ado, Greg is going to walk us through the, as I said, the major events study that tourism economics completed. It was a process. It took quite I don't know, Greg, it took a while, didn't it? I would say. I mean, it was a big study, and I'll let you speak to the methodology, etc. And I will let you take it from here.
Yeah, no.
Also, there's a lot of roosters here on the team, and elected officials and community members, and we have some event organizers. And so thank you, everybody, for joining. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I don't want to be respectful of everybody's time. So you're on, Greg.
Thank you, MJ, and good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Pepitone, and as MJ was saying, I'm a senior economist at Tourism Economics, and I spend a lot of my time conducting impact studies for events, for entertainment venues, for event venues, and more in the broader sports, event, and entertainment sectors. And let me share my screen so you can see the results we have going on here. So is that coming up for everybody? Everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. And so as MJ was saying, we've been working with Roost and 3 individual events to conduct an impact study to assess the impact of these 3 events for 2022. So the most recent events that took place last summer. And today what we're going to do is review those results. But before we get into that, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the scope of the project, the methodology that we used, and some of the data sources where we were deriving our analysis. So the 3 events that we focused on was, the first one was a Lake Placid Summit Classic. And this is a lacrosse tournament. We focused specifically on the events or the tournaments that took place in early August. So it's important to note that there is also an event that takes place at the end of June, a youth tournaments. We focusing on those August tournaments. The second event was Ironman Lake Placid. So that takes place in the end of July. And then the 2 horse shows, so the Lake Placid and I Love New York horse shows, and these take place at the end of June through the beginning of July as well. And so how did we approach this study? So we start with calculating what's called the direct spending. And so this is spending that is 100% attributable to the events themselves. And this is derived in 2 key ways. So the first way is what we consider the operational spending. So the event hosts spend money in the local economy to put on these events. The second way in which direct spending is generated is there are visitors that are coming from outside the local economy to either participate in these events or to watch these events. And while they're in Lake Placid, they are spending money on lodging, on retail, entertainment, food and beverage, and local transportation. And so this focuses on visitors that are coming from outside the local economy. So if there is a local that is participating in one of these events, that spending is excluded from the analysis because of the substitution effect. So we assume that these locals would be spending money in the local economy if they weren't attending or participating in this event. So when you add that operational spending with this visitor spending, we get the total business sales. And the next step is to put this into an input-output model. And we use InPlan, which is a nationally recognized input-output model. And we developed a model specifically for Essex County. And what this does is it enables us to determine what the total economic impacts are. And this includes the direct impacts, but also the ripple effects throughout the economy. So this includes the indirect and the induced business sales. And indirect business sales are basically supply chain impacts. So if there is a concession stand at one of these events, that concession stand purchased food and beverage from a local wholesaler. This purchase from the local wholesaler is considered an indirect impact. You also have induced impacts, which are employment impacts. So someone that's working in one of these direct businesses, that could be for the event itself, for a hotel, a restaurant, or in any of these indirect businesses, so these supply chain industries, they earn a wage from that job and from the work that they do, and they spend a portion of that wage in the local economy. So that's considered an induced impact. So when you have the direct, the indirect, and induced, you get these total economic impacts. And we look at that in terms of the total business sales, the jobs that are supported from this spending, the wages associated with those jobs, and then the fiscal or the tax implications. And we used a variety of sources of data to complete this study. And one of the most important ones, and perhaps why this study did take a little bit of time, was we created a post-event survey. And so we worked with each of the 3 events to create a survey that was distributed to their participants after the event was completed. And it was open for about a month for each one of the surveys. And we gained insights into where these participants were coming from, what the average travel size was for their party, their length of stay, where they stayed while they were in the local economy, and then some insights onto their spending habits. So how much did they spend on food and beverage or retail? In addition to that, we worked with the events themselves, and they were very generous and provided a lot of great information for this study. And we got information on the attendance, also gained insights into their zip code data. So we were able to determine where these visitors were coming from. We also use mobile geolocation data. And what this enables us to do is gain insights from, and this is all anonymous, but we were able to gain some insights into where these participants and spectators were coming from and how long they were staying. So through the post-event survey, the zip code data from the events themselves and this mobile geolocation data, we got numerous different aspects on the origin of these visitors as well as their length of stay. We also received financial data from these events to gain insights into what was being spent in the local economy, so that operational expenditure. We got lodging data from Smith Travel Research, as well as we used other third-party studies as well. So now we're going to jump into some of the findings. And this slide here specifically looks at the Lake Placid Summer Classic. And the findings slides are very similar for each of the 3 event types. So the left-hand side of the screen is really focusing on that direct spending. So that was that first part of the methodology. And you could see that the Summit Classic generated $12.2 million in total direct spending. So this includes a little over $200,000 in their operational expenditure. And then we broke out that visitor spending into two components. Excuse me. We first broke it out to what did they spend during the event itself. So during the tournament, there was $8.8 million spent in the local community by those participants and spectators. This third component is people that participated in the lacrosse tournament. They came to Lake Placid during other times of the year, whether that's to vacation or to train. And during those trips, they spent an additional $3.2 million in the local economy. So when you add all that together, we get that direct spend of $12.2 million. When we put that into the input-output model, the lacrosse tournament generated $15.7 million in total economic impact. So that's that direct, the indirect, and induced expenditures. This helped to support over 200 jobs in the local economy, and it generated $2.3 million in state and local taxes. And so here you could find the insights to the Ironman. So Ironman spent $462,000 in the local economy. So that's their operational expenditure. Participants and spectators spent $8.9 million during the event itself, and then an additional $2.7 million throughout the year, whether they came to train in the region or to vacation. In total, the Ironman generated $15.5 million in total economic impact. It supported 136 jobs and generated $2.4 million in state and local tax revenues. And finally, here is the slide for the two horse shows. So $13.9 million in total direct spending. So $675,000 for the operational expenditures, $12.2 million during the two events, and then an additional $1.1 million throughout the remainder of the year if they came for vacation. So in total, the horse shows generated $17.9 million in total impact. This supported 164 jobs and $2.8 million in state and local taxes. So now what we're going to do is compare an event traveler, so someone that's coming to either participate or watch one of these events, to a typical leisure traveler, to see a little bit about the characteristics and to be able to compare these types of travelers. And so you can see in the left-hand column here, we have data for leisure travel, and then the three right columns present the data for each of the individual events. And you can see, generally speaking, the events themselves are, they attract a larger party size, and they stay for a longer period of time when compared to a traditional leisure traveler. You could also see the type of lodging that they're staying in. And typically the event participants and spectators stay in, there's a higher percentage of them that stay in some sort of paid accommodation, whether that be a hotel, a bed and breakfast, camping, or even a private rental. And you could see here that there's a larger percentage of leisure travelers that might spend their time here with friends or family, or potentially in a second home that they own. And this next slide compares the spending. So it specifically looks at the average spending per party per stay. So this is an aggregated amount for the entire party for their entire trip. And as expected, given the longer length of stay, given the larger party size, Typically speaking, these event travelers have a larger spend per trip than does a typical leisure traveler. So to wrap it up, there was just a couple key points that we wanted to discuss. So some events cause more congestion than traditional leisure travel. And so these events can create road closures, they could create other inconveniences. And in particular, the high impact events could impact locals from enjoying community amenities, whether that's, restaurants or otherwise. And this could adversely impact the locals' quality of life. But on the other hand, these event visitors, as we just discussed, have a longer length of stay. They typically take more people with them on their trips to Lake Placid, and they have an increased spending amount when compared to that traditional leisure traveler. They also come multiple times, or some event visitors come multiple times throughout the year. And perhaps most important is event visitors come from outside the traditional traveler market. So someone that's coming to participate in one of these events might not typically come to Lake Placid otherwise. So this helps to increase that exposure to the region. And so that's all I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, or open to comments as well. And thank you all so much for your time.
And if you have any questions, if you just want to put your name in the chat, or you can just unmute and speak up, whatever you'd like to do. I do think that it's important that we acknowledge that more. So just to go back, this was part of our Lake Placid North Elba destination management plan. One of the initiatives was to create an event management strategy. And so this was just the first step, was to really better understand the economics of events compared to the leisure traveler. So this isn't like, okay, well, we're done. Look, events, generate more revenue than the leisure traveler and longer lengths of stay and higher, this is just one step, is because we all need to acknowledge that we need to find that balance between, the community and the people that live here. And, our events that we know are important to our businesses and to our economy. So, Newt had a question. Is there an estimate on the FISU games and the economic impact? Jim, I don't think that there's been any economic impact study done on the games.
No, there's a final report that's still being compiled, which will have some of that information, but a third party has not been contracted by anybody to look at that at this point.
And then
taking MJ and Jim, we're taking an adjacent look at that, possibly. I don't know that yet, but we're certainly in conversations about looking at an economic impact statement on that as it came into our venues and putting that into our study.
So possibly to come.
Possibly to come, yes, is the answer.
And then Rick had a question for you, Greg. How is the total jobs calculated? Which I think is a good question. I think they're both good questions, by the way.
So there's two components to this. So we know some of the direct jobs from the operations of the events themselves. So each event provided the direct number of jobs that they have in the local community during the event. And then in terms of some of the visitor spending, the input-output model that's created specifically for Essex County is what calculates that based on spending in certain sectors. So implant is used to determine those jobs based on specific model created for the county, for the destination.
Does that answer your, yep, it does, great. Any other, oh, Pat, how do you measure the impact of short-term rentals by private homeowners? How do you measure the impact of short-term rentals by private homeowners? So are you, I'm not, does anybody, do you understand that question, Greg?
Yeah, so if somebody, so we don't have a lodging spend attributable to second homes. So someone that's staying in their home, there's not that's not part of the direct expenditure in the lodging category, but we do consider their spending on food and beverage, entertainment, local transportation, and otherwise.
Pat, does that answer your question? And then Brian, hi, Brian. What is the breakdown of jobs supported by the events? Mostly hospitality. Was that the people that they hired to actually work the events? Is that what that means? Jobs supported by the events?
You're on mute, Greg, I think.
No, I was just rereading the question.
Yeah.
So we have data from the events themselves that said how many people they had in the local community that were being paid to work at the event. And then there was spending in other sectors. And so the full report breaks it down for 17 full sectors. So you would be able to see how many jobs were in the lodging industry, for instance, based on the amount that was spent on lodging. And you're able to see how many jobs were supported in food and beverage, for instance, based on the spending in food and beverage by those visitors.
And I'm just asking Michelle if she can put the full report or a link to the full report in the chat for all of you. It's on our roost80k.com/research is the, I can do it actually. I don't know why I need her, right?
I got it, MJ.
I'm so used to like, and then also there's a press release that'll be going out as well with, an overview.
Notice that there will be text that says view the presentation. That is not there yet because we're still on that presentation.
Right.
Disclaimer.
But, Greg, I think Derek Doty mentioned very concise and to the point presentation. I think the full report is about 42 pages.
Yes. Pat, so when I said the first step, will there be another follow-up or additional studies? At this time, what we're doing is we do have a committee that is working to ensure that the Lake Placid North Elba Destination Management Plan is implemented. And so one of those pillars of that plan, which again is on roost80k.com, that management plan, is to create an events, a major events strategy for the region. So when I say that this is the first step in creating that event strategy, a management strategy, so that we can support the events as well as, balance the impact and mitigate the impact of the events to the people that live in the communities that the events are hosted and, the surrounding communities. Yeah, I want to thank Greg very much for his commitment and endurance. This was a long process. And is there a breakdown of lodging and what towns they may have stayed in? Greg, I don't know if we did that by region. The lodging, I think we did it by type. Is that right?
So you'll see lodging spend but it's for the entire county. It doesn't break it up more granular than that.
As a note, we are doing, using a different data set. We are doing a visualization of Ironman this summer to see that cross visitation and where those folks stay. So we will have that data a little later this summer. That's a separate report.
And everybody, this is Jason Lawrence, our Director of Digital Strategy, and also Michelle Clement, our Director of Marketing. And of course, Jim McKenna is our CEO. Any other questions or comments, suggestions? Does the analysis show the impact of non-event visitors who stayed in paid accommodations versus those that did not pay for accommodations?
Is the question, maybe just, I'm curious to the question, Katie, like was the per party spend more for folks who paid for accommodations versus folks who like stayed with family or friends or something like that? Is that sort of the question?
Katie, feel free to unmute. You don't have to type. You can talk. It's easier. If you can unmute. Always sounds like a good idea.
Sorry, I was just finding the unmute button. Yeah, sorry, it's really a question about how far down the analysis can be segmented. So of those who traveled to the area for recreation or something other than an event, is it possible to distinguish the overall impact of people who stayed in paid accommodation versus people who came to the area for recreation or other purposes other than an event, who, as you say, may have a second home? Because I think that maybe the profile would be a bit different for those groups, so it might be helpful to understand them.
So I think I'm interpreting correctly. This is really focusing on the people that are participating in the event, or those that are coming to watch the event, as opposed to a traditional leisure traveler during that time. The full report does have some insights onto how these events might impact other leisure travelers that would have lodged in Lake Placid during that time.
So just for clarity, Katie, if I'm understanding your question correctly, these larger events, specifically Ironman and Lacrosse, and I'm not sure about the horse show. The question is, how much leisure travelers do they displace, right? Because they usually pretty much fill the town. And so in the report, it does show some data on the leisure traveler that's estimated to be displaced. In other words, they'd be here if they could be here, but
yeah.
That's
really cool. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a nuanced question, but that's really helpful explanation. I'll look forward to reading the report.
And I think one thing there to keep in mind too is having to take into consideration whether they just perhaps delayed their trip by a week or so. So it's hard to tell if that person just decided not to come, or if it delayed it to a different time to avoid being in town the same time as the event itself.
So Lauren, yes, the full study is on roostadk.com/research. And so yes, it is available to the public. And what are the short-term vacation rentals that are rented via Airbnb, VRBO? So it's the question is, what connotates the vacation rentals? Is that everything where occupancy tax was collected, Greg, or was it just they said it was a vacation rental? So the participants during the survey said this is where we stayed.
Yeah, it was really the participants in the post-event survey indicating whether they stayed at, hotel or a short-term vacation rental. So I was,
Does that answer your question, Lauren? I'm gonna say yes. I don't know, where did you go? No, I'm asking what STRs are classified as. Is an STR considered a private rental? Is a short-term rental considered a private rental?
oh, so in the report, we have, we show the percentage of people staying in different lodging types. So we'll have, hotels, which is really hotels and bed and breakfast. We have the short-term rentals as its own category, so that would be Airbnb, VRBO, etc. We have a camping category as well. And then we have an other category, and that other category would include the friends and family or someone owned a second home. So the short-term rentals are their own category.
So short-term rental is a private rental in the report.
Yes.
Jason, do you want to speak a little bit to Zartico? And the visit, Michelle, did you want to mention something? Michelle, Jason, Michelle?
I certainly can, just that in the near future, we'll be sharing a variety of what are called visualization reports that track actual device counts and credit card spend for certain times of certain periods of time and for certain events. We actually did just complete one for the FIS World Ski Jumping Competition. You can actually we'll be putting that out shortly to give you some links and some of the data there, but there's some interesting things that those sorts of reports show. For instance, folks that attended that ski jumping event were much more likely to spend money on Main Street than leisure travelers who were here at the same time. So it's just an example of some of the insights we can garner from some of those events. And we're also going to be taking a look at cross visitation. I know that comes up a lot. How does it affect the surrounding area, especially for the surrounding communities that are impacted as well. So that'll all be coming pretty shortly here. You'll start to see those first reports.
Any other questions or comments?
I think, oh, there she is. I think that Lauren actually asked one additional question. It just came through to me about how the economic study model was tailored to the county.
That's okay. You can ask as many questions as you want, Lauren, and I did not see that question. I apologize.
No, so it's applicable in a couple ways. So when we define the local, right? So that was someone that's coming from, or a local was someone that lives within the county itself. And then when we made the input-output model and implant, it was specifically generated and developed based on Essex County's economic indicators, essentially. So it was specifically developed for the Essex County economy. So it understood kind of that ripple effect, right? So every dollar of spending in F&B, for instance, generated X amount in spending, induced and indirect spending, and generate X amount of jobs. And that's all defined off of the Essex County economy.
Let's see. In the comprehensive report is return rate identified. Example, 55% of those attending the horse show responded to the survey. The question is, what was the response rate of the survey? I think is the question.
I don't believe it's specifically expressed in the report itself. I would have to go back and double check, but I don't think it's shown there.
I don't think it is either.
would you, obviously, there was enough of a response that it was considered a, you know, a comprehensive response enough to solidify the report. Not that I'm
You know,
using
we
appropriate terms.
we
but-
definitely got, you know, good responses, based on, you know, the number of participants that it was distributed to.
Does the report include the cost of putting on and supporting these events spent by local organizations and businesses? So, Jim, you might want to speak to that. I mean, I think that we have some information in regards to Ironman, is that correct? As far as the municipalities, the expense to local organizations or businesses to host these events, I think the majority of the expense would be probably on the town of North Elba with the horse show grounds, and then with local police and highway, et cetera. Is that right, Jim?
Yes, I mean, we have a breakout from the village that shows expenses incurred from, this is for Ironman. We don't have a breakout for the other events. But police, fire, water, highway, total $17,540 is a breakout we have. We look specifically at that with the village. We reached out to the other towns where that particular event happens, and we're not able to obtain any hard costs from those communities.
So from those municipalities, but we know
Right.
that they're right, like the ambulance and
Yeah, for Ironman, yes, but
Yeah.
there is some direct paybacks by that particular, by the Ironman group to those facilities, to those organizations. As
And
far as businesses, I'm not sure that there is an expense associated with it, other than if they hire more people, it's obviously to accommodate more business. So I'm not sure if we can figure that out too much.
You know, theoretically speaking, any expenses paid by Ironman, whether that's for local services, for instance, that's part of their operational expenditure, be part of their financials and part of the kind of the OpEx category in the analysis.
And the full study does outline the operating expenses for the
of
event.
the events.
Yeah.
I think the question is there additional expenses to businesses? And the answer is the additional expenses would be offset by the additional revenues.
And if you think about it, if a visitors come into the region and eats at a restaurant, that restaurant is in the direct industry, right? So that would be a direct spend. And then that restaurant needs to buy food from a local wholesaler. And so that cost of food and beverage, or that cost of paying for their employee for this additional business that they're getting perhaps, is included in those indirect and induced impacts. Kind of those supply chain impacts.
Anybody else have any other questions? They're all good questions. We appreciate taking the time to engage and understand the study, and like we said, it's step one and it will be published.
Could I interject for a second, Mary Jane?
Yes, please do.
Uh,
Welcome back. Supervisor.
Well, thank you. I'm paying for it this
I
week.
bet you are.
Greg, great job. Certainly more questions will come out of this, but I like the fact that you got to the point and you gave us the basis so we could form some questions. And we are an event-driven community. There's no question about it. And because Liz is here from ORDA, let's call that another side of events as well. So I'm wondering if ORDA were available or have the means to put this same kind of report together, because it paints a picture of this area as a whole on just how event-driven we are. Can-Am from October till May 1st, special figure skating events, ski jumping events. So this is such a great start. Mary Jane and Jim, I can't thank you enough for undertaking this with Greg, because it has been the most asked question in our search to figure out what are our seasons all about. You know, we can take numbers from this report and we can apply it directly to sales tax revenue across the county, which ultimately goes to New York State. We are a driver, and this is no secret to anybody that's here tonight, but this area drives so much more than just North Elba, that these reports really have a lot of credibility. And I think the timing couldn't be better. So great job, Roost and Greg. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm.
Liz?
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick. Thank you so much, Derek. And I agree, MJ, Jim, Michelle, these reports are fantastic. We've worked with Greg in the past, and we've ORDA has been doing economic impact studies, at least to my knowledge, since 2012, 2013. So this language of how they come up with these numbers, we're pretty fluent in understanding them. And we're actually working on our own economic impact study for 22, 23 as we speak. So we'll have one from this past year ourselves. And it'll be the first complete year since we've finished all of our venue renovations. So we're excited to see that. But you know, certainly we still weren't in full operation for the entire year. So as we do future studies, we'll have an even better idea on the progression since the previous studies. So we're looking forward to working with Greg and his team, and those guys are the best at doing this. So thank you. And certainly the past reports and surveys that Jim has done is a foundation for gathering this type of information about spend. So it's been very helpful utilizing that data.
Really
Jim.
the whole Boost team. It's not Jim.
And team.
We do an annual leisure travel study. So everybody knows, and again, that's posted on our Roost site. And that shows the, you know, the traveler size, the leisure traveler. And again, that we're always looking to fine tune. We get that information by from a survey. We send that out to our email list, and we entice people to fill out the survey with enter to wins. And so that's where we get that data from. And that's an annual study that we do.
Which is, yeah, which is a good basis, and also a third party compiles the information, which is always good.
Yes. Thank you. That's a good point.
Great. And you know, this New York State studies that look at each county across the state is also done by the firm that Greg works for. So there's a good volume of information to work with when tourism economics looks specifically at things going on in our region. They can pull from a lot of sources.
Michelle, do we have that one on the New York State Tourism Economic Study? Do we have that on our Roost site?
Each year's studies are there. If on that same URL we've been dropping in roostdk.com/research. It shows that New York State studies, as well as our annual leisure travel studies and other research we've conducted over the years. The newest being this, and that's at the very top of the laundry list.
It's not all that we've conducted, it's others, any research that we think is relevant.
Some of it has a lot of what we've done, but also tourism economics and other third parties.
In New York State. Great. There's a lot of information there for all you data people. Have at it. I think if that's it, we can wrap it up for the evening. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me and I will get you the answer or connect you directly with Greg, whichever is probably most appropriate. And maybe even some of our team members might be able to answer the question, however we get you the answer, we will get it to you. Lauren, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out as well. And thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.